Welcome to the Raise podcast. I'm Carol Barwick. We're here to raise your confidence and inspire your creativity. Each episode, we will have a different guest who will be discussing our Raise word. The Raise word is a word that will encourage you or empower you and at times inspire you to explore the word a little more for yourself. Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Raise podcast. My name's Carol Barwick. Usually I would say about some of the podcast episodes that have been so far, and then we dive into talking to a guest. However, this is the 20th episode, and so I have decided that for the 20th episode we're going to look at the word reflect, and we're going to reflect back over all the episodes from the Raise podcast so far. So buckle up. It's going to be a bit of a journey down memory lane. For those of you that have listened to every single one, you can enjoy listening back to some of the things that you've heard already. For those of you that are new to the podcast, it will be a time of choosing which episode you're going to listen to first. Enjoy. It's really fun to reflect back over all the episodes so far. And our very first one was with my friend Karina Parkin from True Colours. I was really nervous. We didn't have all the microphone equipment that we have now, but it was a really lovely episode talking about community and how it's not always easy. Have you got any experience of a time where it wasn't so easy to be in a community environment?
Well, personally, I think it's that sense of people being very busy in their lives and not having time to look outward looking outwardly to other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I think it's going against the tide a bit actually, because you're kind of trying to go, hang on a minute. Yes, we all are busy. Yes, we've all got our lives and we've all got our families and we've got other things going on. But actually, it's really important that we look out for each other and think, not everybody will get that and not everybody will understand that. And I think it's it's really important to kind of shed light on it and go, hang on, we live so close to each other. We need to, connect to each other so that times like now when, like, for example, when COVID hit here, the first thing I thought of was, like, hang on a minute, there's going to be people around me that can't get food. What can I do?
Yeah.
So it was really important for me to do something proactive about it. And but not everybody feels that way and thinks that way, and that's fine. But I think it's really important to raise that sense of we need to look out for each other, because that's part of what life's about, I think.
It's brilliant to know that Karina and True Colours and people like her are doing what needs to be done in the community. Sometimes it's really difficult to do the things that need to be done, even when they seem to be the most simple things. In episode 2, Hannah Johnson and I talked about process. We talked about washi tape and planners, but we also talked about the process of just simply getting up in the morning and how at times that's the most important thing that you can do.
So back to the thing about feeling like you're not doing anything each day. It could, back to my example, it could be little things like I got dressed, I made breakfast, I loaded the dishwasher or did the washing up. They might seem like little things when you think of the big things that change the world, for instance, but actually sitting there and going, actually, I did get dressed today and I did have breakfast and I did do the washing up. And you feel like you've achieved something, even if they do seem like little things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes even getting up, getting dressed and making your bed. It might seem like nothing, but actually you did something with your day.
If you got up, got dressed, kept your children alive, well done. It's not always as easy as it seems. Michelle, John and I spoke about the word voice in our podcast launch episode. We talked about will.i.am and what it's like to have him as a vocal coach. But we also talked about what happens when your voice is silenced through domestic violence. Michelle John is an absolute powerhouse. And when she says you are enough, you need to listen.
All the different labels that we have going through depression, being, whatever our labels are, we've all got them, right? Some of them are positive and some of them are not so positive. And so, as I said, these were like tattoos, invisible tattoos that I carried around with me. And so labels ask the question, Michelle, are you good enough? Am I good enough?
Wow.
With all my labels, with all my stuff, with all my baggage, am I good enough? Am I good enough to be heard? Am I good enough to sing my song? Am I good enough to be a mum? Am I good enough to be loved? Am I good enough as a woman to be in front of a camera? Am I good enough to be on a podcast with my South London accent? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm
All
West
these
London
things.
massive, Michelle, so I'm right there with you, love. Come on, up the Southerners.
Exactly, right. So, am I good enough? And the answer to the question is yes. Yes, with all of these labels, because guess what? All of these labels have made me the woman that I am today.
Come on.
And the voice, the strength that I have, the sound, the reason why I sing the way that I sing is because of these labels.
Yes.
And as I said, I choose every day to have the mentality of a survivor and not a victim.
The incredible and powerful voice of Michelle John there. Do go back and listen to episode 3 as we also share one of Michelle's songs. Absolutely brilliant. Keeping on the subject of singing, episode 4 saw me talking to Beth Morgan from the Creative Choir Leader. Beth and I both run choirs, so as you would expect, we really enjoyed speaking most about lawnmowers.
I think one of the things that I've learned out of all of this is that whatever you're passionate about, whatever it is, whether it's painting rocks or whether it's a sport or whether it's something really niche like restoring mowers or something like that, whatever you're passionate about, is that there will be in the world, there will be a community of people out there who also share your passion. And it's about getting out there and finding them. And I think that is one of the biggest things I've learnt that has come out of the past year. You can find people who are really interested in what you're interested in, even if there's nobody in your local area or your friendship group who are interested in that particular thing that you really love.
I love that. That's a lovely, lovely way to come to an end. So at the end, we always try and do a little bit of a challenge. So let's take on what Beth said. If you've got a passion and you think it's really niche and don't know where your kind of group of connectivity could be, go and have a look. Get on Facebook. Please, if you restore old mowers, please get in touch with me and tell me about that group. I'm not going to join it, but I'm really excited.
This is my dad. So my dad right now is restoring a vintage mower.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So there you go. Go and join Beth's dad in a Facebook group about vintage mowers. And then please get in touch and tell us. I wonder what your community is or where you feel you belong. If you're not sure, maybe after the episode, you could have a little think about the things that you enjoy and look for a group that you might be able to take part in. Everyone deserves to belong. Episode 5 was our most listened to episode to date. It was about the word overcome, and it was with the brilliant Lisa Owen from Hope in Depression. It was incredibly emotional and honest, and it may not be for younger ears, but this clip is talking about what happens when you feel that maybe your story is over. So hope in depression. I mean, that is a powerful 3 words right there. Just tell me about what it is to have hope in depression.
Yeah, it's everything. You know, we have to believe that this isn't our story. When you're in the midst of depression and anxiety, the hope is believing that this isn't going to be the end of my story.
Yeah.
And you know, the truth is, it isn't meant to be the end of your story. You're not well, and so get the help you need. And I promise you can feel better. But without hope, when we think that, and that's how it feels, is a hopeless state, when we feel like I'm never going to get better, which is why I kept asking my husband, am I ever going to get better? It's a horrible, horrible, terrifying state to be in, to think there is no hope. You know, we have to have hope. We have to have something to believe in, that this isn't going to be the forever journey for me. And, you know, thank God it hasn't been. And, you know, I could have ended it, and this wouldn't be my truth today. And that would have been tragic. And for a lot of people, you know, people, when I read in the news, have taken their life, I'm so angry, because I feel like if we could have just reached them and shared the hope with them and told them they can feel better. You know, we're in a society where being feared about being sued as a doctor possibly stops GPs saying that. They don't want to be held accountable for that statement. You can feel better, but I promise you, you can feel better. It's peaks and troughs. It's that mountain journey, isn't it? You're on the top, and then you go in the valley again. And those dips get less and less deep, and they don't feel as traumatic, because you can see the peak again. You can get back up there. We know what we need to do to climb up that mountain. And, you know, analogies are really powerful, and pictures are really powerful. And you were talking about the analogy of the mountain. When I have a wobbly day, Brent is my map reader. He knows how to get back on top of that mountain. So I'll come to him and say, I don't feel right, you know, and then he'll go, well, what's happened? What have you read? Has someone said anything to you? Like, I don't like being shouted at, you know, sometimes that can happen. Like, you know, I don't know, you park badly and someone will shout. He'll go back through, like, what's happened? Or I've read an article that's been really upsetting. And so he'll go, well, of course, what you're feeling is natural, Lisa. That's a distressing story you read. And then he's the mapper saying, come out of this valley, let's get back up on top of that mountain. And so that's where the kind of, you know, support can be so powerful. And you know, takes us back to why the course works, is that when we walk around on our own with those ruminating thoughts in our heads, we are on our own, and we're feeling hopeless and desperate. By having someone in a group of strangers where you can be real and say, do you know what? It's been a really awful week, or I'm not coping, or I don't know if I can go on. And someone saying, how are you? No, how are you really? Happens in the group. It's community. It's powerful. It even happens on Zoom. And that's what we need to do, is to be in relationship with each other. We are not called to be isolated, lonely individuals. We are meant to be talking to people. And what the course is, I often talk about the I'm fine mask, you know, the asking, how are you twice. Yeah. When we say I'm fine, you know, I walked around when I was ill with that I'm fine mask saying, yeah, I'm fine, until that mask became too heavy to carry. And then everybody knew I was ill, because I couldn't hide it. You know, I was crying in grocery stores, I was struggling. And we want to make a space for people where they can put that mask down and enter the room. It used to be live courses, it was a real room, now it's a Zoom room, and say, do you know what, I'm not fine. I'm really struggling. I don't know if I can go on. What can I do? And normalizing that and saying to them, I totally get that you feel that way, but you can feel better. And we're here for you. You're not alone. That's what we want to produce. What we want to create is that community of normalizing their experiences and giving them their tribe, you know, find their people where they can be really them and honest about how they're feeling.
Powerful stuff. If you want to know any more about hope in depression, please go to episode 5, listen through, and you'll find all the details in the show notes at the end. I met Lisa on a business mentorship course called The Lions, but the person that started my Lions journey was Josie Gamble, and I spoke to her in episode 6. We spoke about creativity, Josie is the founder of the brilliant organisation Christian Creative Network, and here she talks a little bit about what it does.
And I guess all of us have this longing to connect with like-minded people, whether that's in business or in hobbies or just people that understand us and our journey. And that's what I've tried to create with the Christian Creative Network, and enabled people to meet with other like-minded people. And I guess what I've discovered is that regardless of your creative expression, you could be a singer-songwriter, or you could be a sculptor, or you could be an architect, and you could be a photographer. Very different expressions, but the creative journey we all go on is very, very similar. Doubts, fears, imposter syndrome, how do you price your work if you are selling it, valuing your own work and time, and all of those things that if you're isolated and on your own, it's very hard to kind of get out of your own head, and you don't get the answers you need. But when you come alongside other people, you hear their stories, you hear their journey, and you realize, oh, you feel that as well. That's actually quite reassuring. And actually there is no one answer to how you price your work, but there are lots and lots of different approaches and tactics, and just hearing other people, it really does encourage and support you. So that's what I've done and given my life to over the last sort of 5 years. And it's I've loved it. I've grown and been encouraged through it. So I hope it helps others too.
I think sometimes we forget that when we're doing something that we really love, we are still learning and growing as part of it. In episode 7, I got to interview somebody that I used to go to school with. Elliot Ray has produced the amazing book Dad, and is soon to be on BBC One in his own television show. Elliot and I had a good giggle talking about childhood and the importance of music. Talk to me a little bit about what music means to you, because when I was reading your chapter, it came up quite a lot that one of the consistent things in your life has been music. So talk to us a little bit about that, please.
So yeah, music is my first love. There's a story that I still love dancing, and we dance around in our living room every day. But when I was little, I'm not quite sure how old I was, maybe 5 or 6 or something, and my parents took us to a wedding with my sister, and I loved Michael Jackson. And apparently, I don't remember this, but Billie Jean was playing or something, and
Yeah.
I was that kid that was always like in the middle of the dance floor, just giving it 110%.
Brilliant. Yeah,
trying to move
that's
forward.
great.
So apparently I was like dancing, and everyone was loving it at the beginning, and then it just gets a bit awkward where this kid
You'll have to get him off the dance floor now.
Yeah.
Please. Somebody come and collect the child.
He had too much Coca-Cola. So they had to drag me off to the dance floor, and they talked about it for years afterwards, and I don't remember, I was too young. But for me, music is, I just feel it. I just feel it in my body. Back in the day, I was a bass player and producer. Me and my wife were in a band together. She's an amazing singer and songwriter, and it's just in me. It's my first passion. I remember buying my first CDs, my first vinyls. I got a massive vinyl collection, and I just enjoy music. It just makes me happy, and it is definitely, there's points in my life where I can soundtrack what I was listening to. So,
cool.
last year, the pandemic, for example, there's a song called Burna Boy called Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Very spiritual song. And that just got me through lockdown. I played it over and over again. I don't know if you know Spotify, but at the end of the year, they give you a roundup about, what songs you listen to.
Okay.
And this song was number one. I've played it a ridiculous amount of times. But for me, music gives me strength. It it's healing. It changes my emotions. If I'm feeling down, it can lift me up. If I'm celebrating, it'll just make me feel better. If I need some motivation, it will motivate me. So I think, for me, it's just life. I love music, and it's so important to me. Even this morning, I was working out, playing music. It just gives me energy. So it's a theme throughout my life. And in my story, I write about some difficult times and traumatic times and stuff. And there were moments of pieces of music that I guess got me through those periods of life.
Have you ever been that kid on the dance floor Of course not. Episode 8 was with the poet Jude Simpson, and we talked about the word unexpected. In the episode, Jude shares lots and lots of poems, but by far my favourite bit was right at the end when Jude wrote a poem for me.
We now come to the part of the show where I write a poem for you. But seeing as the word is unexpected, I wondered if you would write a poem for me first.
Hey. Okay, so I was when you got in touch recently, I was racking my brains to remember how we were first introduced, because actually we've been on each other's radar for a long time.
Yeah.
So I wrote this. Carol, who are you again? I know that we were introduced by a friend. I know people you know who live up north. I know you're a cheerer, an encourager, a force for love and for good and for positive vibes, for singing, for confidence, casting nets wide, a COVID overcomer, a liver with limits. You've a bright, open life and your faith features in it. I know all these things, all you say, stuff you do, but if I'm not mistaken, I've never actually met you.
Oh, Jude. Oh, I love that so much.
We haven't met face to face, have we?
I was exactly the same. I was like, right, okay, so how do I know Jude?
Yeah.
How do I know Jude? How do I know Jude? But I'm just so glad that we do. And that's all that matters.
I think it was Louise, first of all.
Yes, I think it was. That's what I thought.
Fault.
Louise. Yeah. Louise, man, if you're listening, thank you. Because as Jude said, even though we haven't met physically, it's been a great relationship, and it's been lovely to actually talk today and talk about unexpected things. So now I've got to, this is the bit where I take a bit of a deep breath and write something for you. So I'm looking at the brilliant Zoom. The time is ticking down, so the pressure is on. So exciting. So off the cuff, funny stuff. We talked about alligators, scaly and rough, horses cantering down alleyways, dancing, flexible, all kinds of ways to use your words for bringing hope, for bringing up children, for bringing up hope. Words are important. Let's not forget. If it's unexpected, there's always a yet.
I said at the beginning of the episode how much I love poems, and I think that shows you just how much I love writing the poems for our guests. In episode 9, I spoke to Christian comedian Tom Elliott. We spoke about the word clarity. It was very amusing because on the day I was meant to be doing the interview, I had brain fog. Definitely not conducive to an interview about clarity. We speak here about what it's like to be able to bring all the things you love together at the same time, and how that can work if you keep thinking things through.
I think so many of us have lost doing what we want to do. And so it's kind of made us think, right, okay, well, in this time where we've got a bit of time to think, do we really want to do it? What do we really want to do? And the kind of quiet and that enforced sense of lockdown, actually not being able to do anything, has just sharpened everything up, hasn't it? It's like when you're seeing in the dark and your eyes suddenly adjust and you have a new kind of vision and a new clarity. And I think that's really exciting, Tom. How brilliant that you kind of looked at all the different things you loved and realized that they do all work together. Because the reality is, you might have decided that all the things you love are, well, I really love ice cream and I like watching television and I like gardening, so I'm going to do them all together. And that's not going to work, is it? But what you've realized is all the things that you love are going to dovetail together. And I think that's what I've found with podcasting, is it kind of just brings it all together. It sharpens everything up and it gives that clarity of, this is what we need to be doing. This is how we're serving our listeners, our guests, our Raise friends. And it's exciting. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always need to fit together, but when it does, it's beautiful. And do you know, I think all of these things I've been wanting to piece together for years, but just never saw it. And so there's something about the power of just keep thinking it through and keep pondering it, keep talking it through with other people. And then sometimes it just clicks and you've got the idea.
Do go back and listen to that episode. There is so much wisdom in there. Tom is finally getting back out on the road and onto the stage. So do go and find out where he's performing and find out more about him on Facebook and Instagram. One of my favourite things about podcasting is getting to speak to my friends. I find that we make a real impact on each other. And in episode 10, that's exactly what we talked about. We talked about the impact of saying thank you to somebody and what happens if you leave chocolate in your pocket for too long.
Of things. That's why awards are so important, aren't they? Sort of like you might win a BAFTA, like Impact Gamers did in 2018 for being a mentoring. always get the BAFTA in, for mentoring young people through gaming. It like that sits on a shelf and reminds us of, we are here to mentor young people and to support them. And so I think it's really key, isn't it? Sort of like in terms of the challenge, you can be thinking to yourself, what who am I impacting? But if someone has had an impact on you, do let them know. And I think cards are an excellent way of doing that as well, something physical to remind them that they are making a positive difference to this world.
Yeah, and actually, and what you were saying, TJ, about it's not about saying it every single time, because actually it makes more impact when someone just does it once, and when it's someone that you don't expect. That often makes the most impact, doesn't it? So you've got two things to do, listeners. You have to decide who you've made an impact on, and then you have to basically thank somebody else for making an impact on you. They're going to
write
be busy.
them a letter. Write them a letter, a handwritten letter.
Yeah,
and send chocolate.
And our address is
Wait, was the chocolate with that card? Because I wasn't there.
Adam, was there chocolate with the cards?
The Lord Lieutenant obviously isn't listening to these podcasts enough because there was no chocolate.
I thought you were saying Adam might have eaten the chocolate.
Yeah, I thought that's what had happened. Then I was like, wait a minute,
we did get chocolate at the BAFTAs, TJ, that you didn't get. And
I've still got mine. Whilst I was moving, I found it.
Very good.
And I've not eaten it, so I don't know if I can.
It's out of date now, but don't.
I was going to say, I think that might make a significant impact on you, TJ.
Yeah,
chocolate.
It's a special edition on it, so I thought, do I eat it? And then I just didn't eat it because I thought, it's a limited edition.
Okay.
Didn't know you could get limited edition chocolate, but it's a BAFTA head. So I thought I will save this.
Maybe ditch the chocolate and keep the wrapper.
That's a good idea, actually.
Then I think you're going to be safe.
Yeah, because the temptation is there. When I was moving, I was like, I could do with a snack.
Chocolate.
I hope you're enjoying listening to this episode. Word of mouth is such a powerful tool in sharing what we do at the Raise podcast. Please share this episode and other episodes with your friends. And if you could go to the music platform where you listen to your podcast and leave us a lovely positive review or a 5-star rating, that would be fantastic too. Back to the episode. When I reflect back over my time, I think about the people that have come into my life, and my 11th guest, Bryn Llewellyn, was one of those people. I met Bryn while I was doing emotional health and well-being groups at a school. Bryn was the deputy head at the time. Bryn went on to create the brilliant Tagtivate, and he's always seen the potential in children. Here we talk about what happens when someone has a bonkers idea and more importantly, what happens when you do something about it.
If I look back to what I put out to schools in the early days, I thought, well, I'm kind of embarrassed, but I'm like, it's part of the evolution, isn't it? The idea grows, and with the input from not just from teachers but children, they're the ones that come up with the best ideas, and you'll go like, that's bonkers, that'll never work. But then when you talk to them about it, you think, whoa, hang on a moment, there's some mileage here. This is genius.
Yeah. But again, you have to be the kind of person that sees that potential in children, because there are a lot of people that would say exactly what you said, that's a bonkers idea, and just go, so we're not going to do that. But it takes someone very kind of different and special to say, okay, then let's have a go. It might be bonkers, but let's try it and see. And that then activates something in them.
Never underestimate the power of really listening to someone and taking a risk. Episode 12 was the word plan, and it was with Sarah Nicholson. Sarah is a new author, and she's just written her first book, Angel Kind Elevation. We talked about how important it was to have someone supporting you in the planning process.
You have been planning something very exciting. When did you start planning this exciting thing, and what is it?
Yeah, okay. So I have, it feels scary to say this, but I have now written a book, and in a couple of weeks, it is going to be out there for anyone who wants to read it, which is scary, but exciting. So my first book, which is called Angel Kind Elevation, will be out on the 24th of July. In terms of the planning, it is something that I have been working on for a lot of years, I think it's fair to say.
Okay.
I think, like, many people would say, my journey of writing started years and years and years ago. As soon as I was in school, and, you start writing all those stories. And since I was about 4 years old, I remember sitting with my big sister, and we'd, get the stapler out and put our pieces of paper together and write our books. And it's been something that I've always wanted to do. It's always been my plan to do this. And I think this book that I am writing now I've always wanted to write this book as well. I've toyed with other things, I've written other things as well, but this is the book that I've always come back to. It's been something that I've been planning to write for a long time. But in terms of actually going for it and sitting down and making those plans, I've said already that my husband is the planner in our family, and so I spent a lot of time saying to him, I think I'm going to do this. I think I should do it. But it took for us to sit down together, get the kids' felt tip pens out, sellotape loads of pieces of paper together so that the whole lounge was full of paper. And actually, we sat down about 4 or 5 years ago, probably, and wrote the plan of what was going to happen in this book and the next book, because there are, it's a part of a series of 3, the book that's coming out soon. And we sat together, and we, with our color coded who was doing what, how it was going to happen, and we sat and planned that out together. And so for me, having somebody with me in that planning was really important. Having someone to talk that through with and to bounce those ideas off was a really important first stage. And that's kind of where the planning kind of diverges for me between me and Alex, the way that we would have done it. So for me, that was enough planning, and then I just started to write. Whereas I think for Alex, he would have then sat down and made a chapter by chapter summary, and this will happen, and then this will happen. Whereas I was just a bit more like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll just start writing. It'll be great. Which it has. It's been a process. I've probably written about 200,000 words more than I needed to from taking that long scenic route, which I don't think I regret. I knew where I was going, and I knew how I was going to get there. It just took me a long time to get there. But for me, that has been part of the process of writing that. And my planning might not be efficient, but it gets there eventually, I think, is what I would say.
As I reflect back over the last 2 years, I have to admit that I am not always grateful. My guest in episode 13 really challenged me about what it was to have gratitude. Eloho Ifemwai has an amazing testimony, and here's just a small part of it now.
Going back to your question, there's been several times in my life where especially when it comes to provision, there's certain things that we're needing, and it's like what am I going to do? What's the next step to take? I remember once, and this is far back, as even before I had my twins, I woke up one morning and we had just been in the UK for about a year or so. My husband was working at that time, but that day got a message to say his contract was ending, and I was home with my 3-year-old son at that point. I wasn't working because when I moved, I used to live in Aberdeen. When I moved to Aberdeen to stay with him, I thought, okay, you know what, now's my time to just chill. You do all the work. But then, just as I was about chilling, we get this news that, oh, your contract has ended. I'm like, oh my word. So I got my 4-year-old, I think it was about 4 then, 4-year-old son. I said, you know what, right now we're just going to dance. So I put on some African music and we started to celebrate. We were rejoicing. I was just singing for over an hour. I was just celebrating, giving thanks, not knowing what I was doing, not sure what I was doing. But rather than focus on the bad news that we had just received, I turned it into gratitude. I turned it into praise. We sang and sang and sang and sang. Do you know what? That day I decided to put out my CV, and immediately I put out my CV. The next day I got a call from the agency to say, hey, there are 3 positions we think you'll be good for. And immediately I got one of those jobs and I worked there for about 5 years, So that's one example. There have been several other, instances where things haven't gone as well. And rather than focus on what has gone wrong, I chose to give thanks and gratitude instead. And yes, the answer may not have come exactly like it did then, but I was in a much better place in my mind.
I wonder what would happen if you were truly grateful for everything that happened to you today. It's a real challenge, isn't it? Another challenge that I think we have sometimes, and maybe we don't even realise it, is to truly listen. In episode 14, I spoke to my friend Jonathan Pagden about the word listen. Jonathan is a voiceover artist and also has helped me produce a CD. Jonathan is really good at listening, but he's also really good at articulating what it is to listen. Here we are talking about what happens when you truly listen to somebody else. Jonathan, you're right. So right back in the day, we were at church together. And since then, you have helped me in so much of my different kind of production needs, helping me as a singer-songwriter. But you have an awful lot to do with listening. So can you just, first of all, tell us what listen means to you?
It does seem odd, doesn't it, that somebody who is in the business of making noise should put so much importance on listening. But there are several ways you have to think about it. There's a famous quote from an old blues musician. I can't remember who it was, but he said, it's not the notes that are important, it's the spaces in between. And if you think about that, that's for one thing very profound, but also very true, that for everything, not just for music, that you only notice how loud things are getting when they stop. So do you remember last year, the first of the lockdowns, when everything stopped and everybody stayed indoors because everybody was scared stiff because we didn't know what was going to happen. And we were only allowed out once a day for a quick walk and quick bit of exercise and fresh air. And my youngest son and I walked around the block. So we decided at the bottom of the drive, do we turn left or do we turn right? And that was the decision we had to make. And either way, it led to just going around the block. But it was so quiet and we could hear our own breathing as we walked along the street that would normally be having to shout to be heard over the noise of the traffic. And I think everybody had a similar sort of experience then of it being uncomfortably quiet just because we're not used to it. So there's one thing, that noise only really becomes noticeable when it stops. But also listen as in take notice of other people. Because it's so easy, especially in these days when everybody talks all the time, there's all the social media and everything like that. It's very easy to just talk about yourself and that's all as far as it goes. Everybody else is also talking about themselves. And actually, if you stop and listen and sort of step back, Stop talking about yourself, stop talking altogether, and take notice of what other people are saying. It's amazing what you can find out about other people from what they're saying and also from what they're not saying.
I don't know about you, but I could listen to that voice for a long time. Do go back and listen to episode 14. It's a real challenge, but incredibly important. As we reflect back over the last 2 years, I think that everybody would say that there have been many, many challenges, and we've grown stronger as a result. In episode 15, I did a very special interview with a very special lady, Becky Metcalf. I didn't even know Becky Metcalf 2 years ago, but I met her as she also has long COVID. We spoke about strength, and one of the things that Becky and I used to enjoy doing, and still do, is writing poetry. Here's one of Becky's poems. And one of the things that has been really fun in that group, and I think it's really important to notice that we can still have fun and be light-hearted even through this, is we started to do poetry battles, didn't we, Becky? I can't remember who started it first. I think you did. I think you put a poem on, and then we talked about kind of opening it up so that other people in the group could write poetry. And you have written some amazing poetry, stuff that really has resonated with other people. So I am going to stop talking and give the floor to you to share one of your poems, please.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to read one from probably the more darker days that I've had. This was from roughly April this year, which will have been a year into my long COVID journey, before I had any help from a long COVID clinic, so I was in a pretty bad way. Where is she? Where has she gone? She's been grieving herself for far too long. Looking in the mirror, who does she see? It's somebody else, she thinks, it's not me. Putting on her clothes that made her feel good, but now they look different, she knew they would. Trying to find herself, all she does is cry, feeling like an imposter, living a lie. She gets down and she gets sad because she is no more. The thought of her not returning leaves her feeling unsure. But little does she know, the new person she can see is stronger and wiser than she ever thought she could be. She's loved, she's lost, she's mourned, she's fought. She's not as different as she originally thought. She's brave, she's courageous, she's loving, she's kind. She reminds herself that she's not being left behind. She's on her own journey, going down a different path, but she will continue to be kind, continue to laugh. She's matured, she's grown, she will have no regret. She has forgiven the virus, but she will never forget. The long-term effects will be behind every door, but she will learn to love herself forevermore.
Powerful stuff there from Becky. Many of you will know that I believe that my strength comes from my faith in God. And when it came to starting a podcast, although I knew that God had called me to do it, I had no idea where to start. My business coach, Anna McManus Hughes, told me about the podcast queen, Anna Parker Naples. Lots of Annas there. I went onto Facebook and I looked up what Anna Parker Naples was about, and I could see that she was absolutely incredible. I was nervous, but in the end, I did 3 of Anna's Facebook challenges. And by the 3rd time, I knew that I was ready and had the strength to launch my own podcast. Imagine how excited I was in episode 16 to interview Anna Parker Naples herself. She is inspiring. And here's some of her journey to podcasting. What inspired you to look at podcasting? Because you talked about the red carpet and doing voiceovers, and I know you've done an incredible amount of work using your voice and really enjoying that. But what kind of took you to podcasting and then on to wanting to share that with other people?
So I came, the reason I was in Hollywood was because I was working as a voiceover artist and a voice actor. So I was working on audiobooks, Hollywood games, the video games, really high profile stuff. A lot of it I'm never allowed to actually say what I did because it's non-disclosure, but I basically got to the top of that field and I'd learned everything from scratch, and the majority of the editing and the audio side of it, I had to really battle to learn it. It wasn't something that came naturally to me, but it was the thing that gave me hope that if I never walked again, if I could never travel again, if I could never be on stage again, I could feel as though I was using my talents. I was an actor. I was a stage actor, not musicals. It was always about the words and the sound of the voice, actually. So it gave me hope in the first instance. Then I thought I was leaving that space because I wanted to get my message out there. And I literally had this moment of, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is why I've been through the horrendous thing I've been through, because I want to show others. And I knew my story had something quite compelling in it. I also knew I had the innate skills to get this message out there somehow, whatever that looked like. And I thought at the time that would be maybe being a coach. Wasn't really thinking about that, but being on stages, being a speaker, and definitely being a multi-book author. And as I came into the kind of online field, really, to raise my profile, I had an understanding of building a personal brand. I realized I didn't know how to do it in the online space, but somebody happened to say, well, why don't you start a podcast? So I kind of went, yeah, okay. And because I had a recording studio at home, I had actually recorded it and put it out on Apple within about 4 hours.
Wow.
But I didn't know how to use it for my business. I didn't really know how to use it to reach the people I wanted to reach. So whilst it was out there and I was still really proud of it, it wasn't having the impact that I was seeing some of the big podcasters have. And I'm a really competitive person. If I go into a field, there's a strong chance I'm going to try and position myself at the top rather than sort of faff about at the bottom. So I decided that I would basically, even though my podcast was already out there, I would go back and learn, why are these people's shows working really well? Their audios no better than mine. So what am I missing? And at the same time, I was on this enormous journey of how you use the online space for good, how you use it to get your message out there, how you become known, how you get connections and referrals, how you get those speaking opportunities. And bit by bit, people, as I'm sharing my story, people would come to me and say, oh, Anna, I'm having trouble with my podcast, or I want to sort my podcast, or I've had a problem with the audio. And I would just fix it. I'd tell them how to fix it or give them advice on it because it was second nature. And actually for me, in the back of my head, in a few years' time, I might teach someone how to podcast. But I never want to teach something if I don't feel as though I really know it and I can really be the proof of what's possible. And I sat in my parents' garden just about to go on my summer holiday, and I'd ordered all of these books about podcasting, so that eventually, if I decide to teach, I kind of know. And one of the books was so bad that I literally said out loud to my parents, this is the worst $11.99 I've ever spent. And why isn't someone teaching people how to do this properly? They're not telling them about the audio, and they're not telling them how to do it to actually reach the right people and how to do it to support their business. And it was literally at that moment, the penny dropped. And within 48 hours, I had got 8 people signed up to do a course with me. I had made the commitment that I was going to write that book. And in fact, as we're recording, it's actually a copy of it is sitting behind me. Now called Podcast with Impact.
Got that one.
And that everything happened very, very quickly. And once I delivered the course, I was actually then launching my second podcast, which was called Entrepreneurs Get Visible. Because I wanted to demonstrate all the things I had read and studied and learned about and actually put them into practice, rather than just be that person who says, if you did it this way, it would work. I actually wanted to prove it worked because I did. And I was one of the first kind of entrepreneurial people in the UK who didn't have masses of followers to get a top charting show in the UK. And it was amazing seeing myself up there alongside people like Tony Robbins and Marie Forleo and Amy Porterfield and Jay Shetty and amazing, amazing people. And there was me. And that kind of really put me on the map. And as a result of that, my first book, Get Visible, became a bestseller. And the idea was just born. Like I knew, because of my audio background, that I could really make this space work for me, that I could be that go-to person legitimately, because I now had a really successful show and I have an incredible audio background. And I wasn't seeing that. A lot of people were starting to teach podcasting because it was a business opportunity. Yeah. And why wouldn't they take that? But they didn't have the background or the successful show that I did. So it's kind of just grown from there, really.
If you're listening to this podcast episode thinking I could definitely do a better podcast than this, then please look up Anna Parker Naples. She will tell you everything you need to know about starting and launching your own podcast. When it comes to reflecting back over the episodes, there's always one that I forget. And it's the word remember. It's not because of the guest. Angie McCrell is an amazing human being, and I have loved meeting her over the last year. I think it's because it made such an impact on me, and it was the content that was so important that I've almost forgotten the word that we talked about. Here's why journaling is so important to Angie.
Without journaling, actually, it's so helpful for me. The two big things that help me, every week are journaling and running. And that's been ever since the year that my dad passed away. Those two things have really helped me. So I just do them. When you find something that works, you stick with it. And journaling is such I want to say cheap option for anybody, because there are some people that can't afford lots of therapies, but journaling you can do anywhere. Even if you did get my book, it's still, so it's a 2-month journal, which is basically, I think, under £5 a month. And everybody can put £5 aside each month to help their well-being.
One of the most important things about this podcast is that people are impacted. I believe that the things that people say in the interviews are so important for raising confidence and inspiring creativity. I've signposted many people to the episode about Remember, people that are grieving and that don't know what to do with their grief, people that want to document things that are happening along the way but just can't get that consistency. If you want to know more about what Angie McCrell does, please go to Red Mug Coffee Mama. That's Red Mug Coffee Mama. You'll find all about it in the episode show notes. I've met lots of different people on this podcasting journey. I've met Angie and I've met Becky through long COVID, and another lady that I've really connected with through long COVID is Lorraine Wheeler. Lorraine and I have really enjoyed being creative. We've written parodies together, we've done an improv group together, but I knew that I wanted to talk to Lorraine about the word enough. Listen here as we talk about sufficiency, and Mary Poppins gets a mention or two. It's such a big topic, isn't it? And I wonder if we can just explore for a minute. I'm curious about the difference between enough and sufficient, because sufficient for me kind of implies a feeling of content and kind of fed or having a need met. Is enough the same, do you think?
It's interesting, obviously, because I was coming on here, I had a little look at what the word means. And I think most of the definitions that I have found, at least, lend themselves to sufficient more than what we sort of tend to use the word to mean. So we tend to say, oh, I've had enough. or that's enough, if we're scolding our children, not that any of us do that,
of course not.
but I would say the way we've started to use the word in that sense is almost, by the time we say enough, we mean too much. We've already had too much.
Okay.
So I think sufficient is actually a really good interpretation of the word, and it's about fostering, therefore, what is sufficient unto the day.
Yeah.
So my great aunt, bless her soul, used to say when we went out for meals, she used to push her plate away and say, "I've had an elegant sufficiency."
Oh, that's lovely.
Rather than stuffing her face and emptying her plate, which I think is sort of metaphorically, I guess, what we now feel like we need to do.
Yeah. I love the phrase from Mary Poppins. My husband absolutely hates it, but she says, "Enough is as good as a feast."
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
Because what that speaks of to me, and I love Mary Poppins as well. I grew up on it.
And did you like my Mary Poppins voice? I've been channeling.
Oh, that was amazing. Amazing, Julie Andrews.
Practically
You're doing a lot of
perfect.
Julie Andrews at the moment. Well done,
We
you.
are. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Lost train of thought. Yeah. So the idea of enough being as good as a feast is that really anything beyond enough is excess and is therefore wasted. So like when you put too much food in your body, and I'm talking to myself, preaching to myself here, your body doesn't need the excess. So when we clear our plates, literally, when we clear our plates, rather than stopping when we've had the elegant sufficiency, we are just giving ourselves far more than we need. And so whether you stop at the elegant sufficiency or whether you clear your plate, as in a feast, you're still meeting your needs, you're then exceeding your needs. So I think Mary Poppins is absolutely right.
If you want to hear me channeling my inner Julie Andrews, then you can find the song that Lorraine and I wrote at the end of episode 18. And I also do songs and parodies on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Raising Confidence, Inspiring Creativity. When it comes to reflecting back over all the episodes, episode 19 definitely had the most important story. I really wasn't feeling very well. Technology definitely wasn't playing ball. And the Tesco delivery man didn't seem to get the memo about not delivering while I was in the middle of recording a podcast episode. However, Julie Wilkinson and I had an amazing conversation about the word story. And we spoke about the Japanese art of kintsugi, using gold to fill in the cracks and make things even more beautiful. I really felt that in this episode, that's what happened, that there was a vein of gold running all the way through it. Here's Julie telling her incredible story about kintsugi.
This is a story that I wrote that I think best sums up what I try and do through storytelling, I guess. Just tiny intro. A few years ago, I found out about the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is mending broken pots by sort of fixing them back together, and they put gold lacquer in the cracks, so they make the brokenness a sort of feature of beauty of the pots, and that inspired me to write this story. So it's called Kintsugi Tale. She stands in the entrance to the workshop, a paper-wrapped bundle in her hands. It is dark. A shadow moves in the far doorway, and then there is light. He stands there, the master craftsman. Can I help you? I was told maybe you could. With this? She places the bundle on the wooden surface, unwraps it. Shards of a teapot, glossy black glaze, delicate hand-painted orchids. He leans over to examine it. She looks around the room. Shelves full of mended and half-mended pots, broken pieces brought back together with gilded seams of gold. She gasps. He looks up. They're beautiful. It's kintsugi, he says. The idea that broken fragments can be mended and turned into things of beauty. I can fix your teapot. You can wait if you like. He takes down bowls and brushes, bottles and tools, and lays them on the table. Begins to mix the lacquer. She steps into the studio, reaching up to trace a delicate golden vein on the surface of a deep blue cup. And he begins to speak. It's not only for pots, you know. Let me tell you about the world. It dawned with the dawning. The world was new, whole and unbroken. In the heavens, the Creator had a crucible of gleaming molten gold, sacred, holy. And in everything that he made, in its heart, he placed a single drop of the golden liquid to carry into the world. He knew what was to come. And so it has been. But Kintsugi still surrounds us. It glows in our hearts and tiptoes out into our homes. It binds families together, perfectly underpinning our imperfect love. It trails from fingertips that cook and clean and tidy and fix. It fastens buttons, laces shoes, straightens collars. It imprints the fabric as hands fold clothes. It brushes hair, mops up spills, washes dishes. It tucks in the blankets as babies dream. Softly, it sings skittish senses to sleep. Kintsugi seeks itself in the heart of the other, and it weaves the warp and the weft of friendship. Resolute on resolution, it rises with the clash of the discordant voice. Rigorous in restoration, it whispers the words of regret and reparation. Wherever there is mending, it is there. It flares from fire engines, forming footprints behind heroes who run toward danger. It whirls from police sirens and powers paramedics. It steadies the hands of surgeons. It heats soup in shelters, fills food bank shelves. It inhabits the hospice and hospital wards. It lingers with the lonely and grieves with the broken. It befriends, translates, advocates, donates. It throws its doors wide. It builds homes for the homeless and brings hope where there is none. It rises and tramples injustice. Kintsugi holds our children. It skips through our playgrounds and sits in our schools. It stays up past midnight while teachers are marking. Maker of community and fueler of commitment. Kintsugi seeks beauty in a world that is broken. It flies from the fingers of artists and writers and moves in the minds of musicians. It dances and twirls and runs and leaps. It is the teller of tales. Kintsugi is the helping hand and the listening ear, the extra mile and the being here. It is the heart that beats for the poor and alone. It is the waiting voice at the end of the phone. And when all is still and the tumult ceases, Kintsugi remains. It is written through creation, stamped on the world in a fine filigree of invisible golden threads. It sings from the peaks of mountains and wheels across the ocean. It gallops on the wind and it glistens with the dew. It glows with the sunrise and blazes at sundown. Dormant in the ground, it waits until barren times are over. We are Kintsugi, and Kintsugi is us. Here you are. She looks up. It feels like merely minutes, but it could have been hours. He is holding her teapot. Glossy black glaze. delicate hand-painted orchids, all held together with gilded seams of gold.
What an important story. Never underestimate the power of hope. We're pretty much at the end of our time of reflection. 20 episodes. Can you believe it? I wanted to say thank you to each one of my guests for their honesty and their understanding of the Raise word and how they've delivered it. I think we've all got so much out of these episodes so far. We're going to do a couple more and then we're going to take a break, ready for a brand new season coming soon with lots and lots of new guests and new things to learn together. I've said thank you to lots of people in this episode, but there is one person that we haven't spoken about yet. For those of you that listen to the episodes regularly, you'll know that my son Seb does a final thought at the end of each one. Seb might just be 8, but he's wise beyond his years, and I've really valued the things that he's said. He's come to the end of doing the final thought now, but I wanted to say a huge thank you. Seb is a real encouragement to me. He loves listening to the podcast episodes. So thank you, Seb, from all of us. I hope you've enjoyed this time of reflecting together. Please continue to share with people so that as a community we can keep raising people's confidence and inspiring their creativity. Take care.